When the HOA president towed my truck from my own driveway at 2 a.m., she had no clue I literally owned the road her million-dollar house sits on, and could legally cut off her access forever. I came home from a 14-hour shift to find my work truck gone. My livelihood vanished. The diesel exhaust still hung in the air like evidence of theft. Security footage revealed the truth. There's Vivian Whitmore, our self-appointed neighborhood dictator, pointing and directing the tow truck driver with the confidence of someone who thinks rules don't apply to her. That smug wave she gave my camera, the satisfied little smirk as $60,000 worth of my equipment disappeared. The metallic taste of rage filled my mouth as I stood on the gravel driveway I'd been parking in legally for 15 years. 6 months later, she was sobbing in front of the city council, begging me not to declare her street unbuildable and destroy her property value forever. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your property? Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. Let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started. My name's Garrett, and 3 years ago I lost my wife Elena to cancer. She left me this modest ranch house in Pinecrest Meadows, 127 homes built between 1998 and 2003, back when contractors actually gave a damn about using real wood instead of particle board held together by hope and paint. The house sits on a corner lot with a circular driveway, technically 2 addresses, which becomes crucially important later. I'm a general contractor, 47 years old, and I work my ass off renovating historic buildings downtown. 60-hour weeks are normal when you're trying to preserve something beautiful in a world that wants to tear everything down for another Starbucks. My diesel F-350 with company logos isn't winning any beauty contests, but it's paid for, and sometimes I park my work trailer there too. The truck smells like sawdust and honest work, something that apparently offends certain people's delicate sensibilities. Pinecrest Meadows used to be a real neighborhood. Blue-collar folks who built these homes with their own hands and actually lived in them. Kids rode bikes in the street, neighbors borrowed sugar, and nobody gave a damn if your grass was exactly 2 3/4 inches tall. But around 2019, after property values shot through the roof, we got invaded by California transplants with more money than common sense. That's when the HOA formed, supposedly to protect property values. Translation: make sure the poors know their place. Here's the kicker. My lot predates those HOA covenants by exactly 6 months. Elena made sure of that when her father sold the land. Smart woman, my Elena. I still smell her vanilla candles sometimes when I walk through the house, like she's watching over me, making sure I don't let anyone push me around. Enter Vivian Whitmore. 52 years old, real estate agent, moved here from California in 2020 and immediately got herself elected HOA president on a property values protection platform. Lives in an $850,000 McMansion 3 houses down, drives a white Tesla Model S with vanity plates reading House QN. You know what's funny about people who need vanity plates to announce their authority? They usually don't have any real authority. This woman actually measures neighbors' grass with a ruler. I've seen her do it. At 7 a.m. on a Saturday, ruler in hand, like some demented suburban surveyor. Our first encounter happened at the mailbox cluster. I'm checking my mail, enjoying the fresh asphalt smell from the road crew that just finished resurfacing, when I hear designer heels clicking on concrete like a countdown timer to trouble. Garrett, right? Her voice was syrupy sweet, like artificial vanilla mixed with condescension. I'm Vivian, your HOA president. I wanted to chat about your work truck. The woman was drowning in perfume-overwhelming vanilla that mixed with the asphalt smell and made my eyes water. My mailbox hinges squeaked as I closed it, and suddenly that sound seemed amplified in the awkward silence. What about it? I asked, pulling out a certified mail envelope. The thick paper felt rough against my work-hardened hands. Well, it's just that some neighbors feel it degrades our neighborhood aesthetic. I'd love to help you find more appropriate commercial parking. I explained politely that I wasn't an HOA member, that my property predated their rules, and that I parked legally on my own land. Her smile never wavered, but her eyes went cold. Everyone needs to contribute to community standards, Garrett. We're all in this together. That's when I knew this woman was going to be a problem. People who use your name too much in conversation are either selling something or planning to screw you over. A week later, city code enforcement knocked on my door. Anonymous complaint about unlicensed commercial vehicle storage. The inspector found no violations, but mentioned something interesting. The complaint used very specific terminology language only someone with real estate knowledge would use. Whoever called this in knew exactly what buttons to push, he said. They wanted me to find something wrong, but your setup's completely legal. That's when I realized Vivian Whitmore wasn't just being petty. This was calculated warfare. She'd researched city codes and probably expected me to roll over and comply like a good little peasant. She had no idea who she was dealing with. 2 weeks after the code enforcement incident, Vivian launched full-scale psychological warfare disguised as community concern. This woman went door to door with a petition demanding City Council impose commercial vehicle restrictions in our neighborhood. Picture this. Vivian armed with a 3-ring binder full of printed photos of my truck taken from multiple angles, morning, noon, and night shots like she was documenting evidence for a felony case. She told neighbors my F-350 would attract more contractors and lower property values, because apparently the sight of honest work is contagious and might infect the whole subdivision with blue-collar cooties. The woman actually measured the distance from my bumper to the sidewalk with a tape measure. I watched her do it through my kitchen window while drinking my morning coffee. 27.5 inches, in case you're wondering. She managed to get 23 signatures out of 127 households, mostly from newer residents who'd never spoken to me, but were apparently terrified that my truck might spawn an invasion of working-class people with functional vehicles. When Harold told me about the petition, his weathered hands shook with anger. This 73-year-old retired electrician who helped wire half these houses was literally trembling with rage. "That woman's been telling people you're planning to turn this into a commercial district," Harold said, his gravelly voice thick with disgust. "Some folks are scared their property taxes will go up, but Garrett, there's something you should know about your property. The records are interesting." The city council meeting was held in the Civic Center, where folding metal chairs squeaked like torture devices every time someone shifted nervously. The air reeked of burnt coffee and bureaucratic desperation. I walked in wearing my cleanest work shirt, carrying a manila folder that would obliterate Vivian's little crusade. Vivian presented first, those designer heels clicking across marble floors like a countdown to her own humiliation. She painted me as a neighborhood menace, a threat to property values and community standards. Her pen clicked nervously, click, 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 like a metronome keeping time to her lies. When my turn came, I stood calmly and dropped Elena's death certificate and inheritance documents on the table. The room went silent except for the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps. "I've been parking in that driveway legally for 15 years, I said, looking each council member in the eye. "I'm a licensed contractor who's worked on half the homes in Pinecrest Meadows, including 3 houses owned by people who signed this petition. Then came my business license, liability insurance, and something beautiful 3 longtime neighbors standing to testify." Harold talked about how I'd rewired his garage for free after a storm. Mrs. Chen described how I'd installed grab bars for her elderly mother, no charge. Dave mentioned the foundation repair I'd done after his flooding, materials only. The council voted down Vivian's petition unanimously, 5-0, complete annihilation. But here's the mini twist that revealed exactly what kind of sociopath I was dealing with. After the meeting, Vivian cornered me in the parking lot with an Oscar-worthy performance of fake concern and manufactured vulnerability. "Garrett, I had no idea about your personal situation," she purred, voice dripping with artificial sympathy. "Losing Elena must have been devastating." I thanked her and headed toward my truck, but she wasn't finished. "You know, I have extensive connections in real estate. If you ever decide this neighborhood isn't the right fit for your current lifestyle, I could help you find something more suitable to your needs." Let that sink in. This woman had just been publicly humiliated, embarrassed in front of the entire city council, and her immediate response was suggesting I sell my home and move somewhere more suitable. Translation: where poor people belong. The diesel exhaust from my truck mixed with her overwhelming vanilla perfume as I climbed into the cab, creating a scent combination that somehow perfectly captured this whole insane situation. "Thanks, but I'm exactly where I belong," I said, and drove away. But Harold's words kept echoing in my head as I pulled into my driveway. "The property records are interesting. Your wife's daddy was a smart man, made sure to keep certain rights when he sold to the developer. Vivian's Tesla sat in her driveway 3 houses down, and I could see her silhouette through the windshield, probably on the phone with her lawyer or plotting her next attack. You know what's hilarious about people who mistake kindness for weakness? They always assume working folks are too stupid or too tired to fight back. They count on us being grateful for whatever scraps they allow us to keep. As I sat in my truck, keys still in the ignition, I made a decision. It was time to find out exactly what rights Elena's father had been smart enough to keep. Vivian Whitmore was about to discover that some of us don't just fight back, we fight smart. Vivian's public humiliation at city council triggered something primal in her real estate agent brain-pure, calculated revenge disguised as community protection. What came next was systematic psychological warfare that would make a CIA operative proud. It started with the 6 a.m. noise complaints. Every single morning when I left for work like I'd done for 15 years, she'd call the city about excessive noise violations. My diesel engine warming up was apparently disrupting her beauty sleep from 3 houses away. "Look, Mr. Hayes," Officer Martinez said, the 4th time that week, "your truck's well within legal noise limits, but I have to respond to every complaint." The morning air carried the scent of fresh-cut grass and Vivian's desperation. I could see her white Tesla positioned strategically in her driveway, giving her a perfect surveillance view of our conversation. But noise complaints were just foreplay. Vivian filed a Better Business Bureau complaint claiming unprofessional conduct and neighborhood disruption by my construction company. She somehow produced 3 anonymous customers, alleging I was difficult to work with and created disturbances. The BBB investigation took 2 weeks and found 0 merit. Funny how those anonymous complainers vanished when investigators tried to contact them for follow-up interviews. Then came the Facebook stalking campaign. Vivian posted daily photos of my property in the HOA group, my truck's parking angle, my work schedule, even the time I took my trash out. She recruited new allies, the Morgans, a couple who wanted their neighborhood to have that executive country club feel. "Some of us moved here for prestige," Mrs. Morgan commented. "Not to live next to a construction depot." That's when I installed 6 HD security cameras with night vision and motion sensors. They made a distinct electronic hum when activated, a sound that seemed to make Vivian particularly jumpy during her daily photo shoots. You know what's beautiful about paranoid people? They document their own crazy behavior better than any prosecutor could. But here's where Vivian revealed her true predatory nature, the mini twist that showed this wasn't random harassment, it was business strategy. My realtor friend Jake discovered Vivian had been telling potential buyers I was a problem neighbor who might impact their property enjoyment. She was actively sabotaging my property value while using my harassment as a selling point for other listings. Jake showed me 3 recent sale descriptions mentioning neighborhood improvements in progress and resolution of commercial vehicle concerns. "She's playing both sides," Jake said over coffee, his voice thick with professional disgust. "Creating the problem, then selling the solution to buyers who don't know the truth." The bitter espresso smell mixed with my black coffee somehow captured the exact taste of what we were dealing with. A businesswoman who saw my home as an obstacle to her profit margins. Then came the 2 a.m. towing incident that changed everything. I woke to the sound of chains and hydraulics. My F-350 was being hooked to a tow truck in my own driveway. I threw on clothes and ran outside, but the driver had already secured my livelihood. "Anonymous complaint about illegal street parking," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Trucks over city weight limit for overnight street parking. It's in my driveway. Front bumper's technically over the sidewalk easement. Makes it street parking under Ordinance 47B. There she was, Vivian, standing in her front yard in a silk bathrobe, arms crossed, watching $60,000 worth of my equipment disappear. When our eyes met, she smiled and gave me that same smug little wave from our first encounter. The metallic clank of tow chains echoed through the sleeping neighborhood as my ability to work vanished around the corner. The taste of pure rage filled my mouth, metallic and sharp like blood from a bitten tongue. Towing fees, $485. Storage, $95 per day. The cost of retrieving my livelihood. A week's wages I'd never earn back. But security footage revealed the smoking gun. Earlier that night, Vivian had crept around my driveway with a tape measure, calculating the exact distance from bumper to sidewalk. She'd researched the ordinance, measured the violation, and executed her plan with surgical precision. The woman had literally measured my truck's position to find a technicality that would cost me hundreds of dollars in a day's work. That moment, standing in my empty driveway at 2:30 a.m., watching the taillights of the tow truck disappear, I realized something crucial. I wasn't dealing with a crazy neighbor having a breakdown. I was dealing with a calculated predator who'd identified her prey and was systematically trying to force me out. Time to stop playing defense and start playing chess. And thanks to Harold's hint about interesting property records, I had a feeling the game was about to change dramatically in my favor. After the towing incident, Vivian apparently decided subtle psychological warfare wasn't moving fast enough. Time for legal intimidation, the nuclear option of suburban bullies who've run out of reasonable options. 3 days later, I found a thick envelope from Whitmore and Associates Legal Services in my mailbox. The paper felt expensive between my calloused fingers that heavy stock lawyers use to make their threats seem more legitimate than they actually are. Inside was a cease and desist letter demanding I remove my security cameras for violating neighbors' privacy expectations and cease my pattern of harassment and intimidation. The letter claimed my cameras were causing Vivian severe emotional distress and threatened a lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, invasion of privacy, and creation of a hostile living environment. The kicker? A bill for $2,400 in legal fees that I was expected to pay immediately to avoid further legal complications. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. This woman had stalked my property for months, illegally had my truck towed, and was now claiming that my cameras pointing at my own property constituted harassment. I called Jake, my attorney friend who'd helped navigate construction contracts for years. His office smelled like leather-bound law books and the kind of confidence that comes from actually understanding the law, instead of just throwing around legal-sounding threats. "This is absolutely hilarious," Jake said, reading the letter with obvious amusement. "Cameras on your own property pointing at your own property are completely legal." Plus, her attorney made 3 factual errors about property line definitions and cited a case that was overturned in 1987. His pen tapped against the mahogany desk as he scanned the document. This wasn't written by anyone with real estate law experience. Looks like she hired the cheapest intimidation artist she could find on Craigslist. So what do? Let me respond for free. I'll explain basic property law to this amateur and mention that filing frivolous legal threats can result in state bar sanctions and fee reversals. But while Jake was demolishing Vivian's legal fantasy, she escalated on another front. She called an emergency HOA meeting to discuss what she dramatically termed the disruptive resident crisis threatening our community's future. 27 people showed up, the highest attendance in HOA history. Vivian presented an actual PowerPoint called Protecting Our Investment, the Haze Problem. She had pie charts showing declining property values in areas with commercial vehicle presence, and bar graphs comparing our neighborhood to similar executive communities. The woman had turned harassment into a multimedia presentation. The community center reeked of burnt coffee and nervous energy as neighbors who'd known each other for decades found themselves choosing sides. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of manufactured controversy, while Vivian painted me as a neighborhood terrorist. "Garrett Hayes has demonstrated an escalating pattern of aggressive surveillance," she announced, clicking through photos of my security cameras like they were evidence of war crimes. "His intimidation equipment is creating a hostile environment that's destroying all our property values." She proposed a special assessment fee of $200 per household for legal defense funds and enhanced security measures to combat what she called the Hayes security threat. That's when Harold had enough. The 73-year-old retired electrician stood up, gripping his walker, and his gravelly voice cut through Vivian's corporate presentation like a buzzsaw through plywood. "I helped wire half these houses with these hands," he said, raising his weathered fingers. "Garrett Hayes has been nothing but helpful to this community for 15 years. This woman is trying to bully a widower out of his home, and I'll be damned if I'll sit quiet while she does it." Mrs. Chen stood next, followed by Dave, then 3 more longtime residents who walked out in solidarity. The room buzzed with uncomfortable murmurs as people realized they were watching their community tear itself apart. But here's the mini twist that revealed Vivian's complete psychological break. While she was busy playing victim at the HOA meeting, someone spray-painted "MOVE" across my garage door in foot-high red letters. My HD security cameras caught every detail. At 11:47 p.m., a figure in dark clothing and unmistakably distinctive designer heels approached my garage with spray paint. The face was hidden, but that click-click-click gait was as recognizable as a fingerprint. The next morning, acrid paint fumes hung in the dawn air like evidence of Vivian's mental breakdown. The rough texture of dried paint over smooth metal felt like a declaration of war under my fingertips. Deputy Williams took the report but shook his head. "Height and build match your neighbor, and those are definitely women's heels, but we can't see the face clearly enough for charges." Still, he paid Vivian a courtesy visit about property damage and stalking laws. I watched through my window as she answered her door in full makeup at 9 a.m., performing shocked innocence for an audience of one very unimpressed deputy. That night, sitting in my idling truck, staring at "MOVE" spray-painted across my garage, Harold's words echoed louder than my diesel engine. "Your wife's daddy was smart, kept certain rights when he sold to the developer. Time to discover exactly what rights Elena's father had preserved. Because Vivian wanted hardball? I was about to show her what real power looked like." The next morning, I called Pinnacle Title Company and requested a comprehensive property report, the kind that goes back to the original land grants and traces every single transaction, easement, and covenant attached to my lot. Cost me $340. But sometimes you need to spend money to understand exactly what you own. 3 days later, I sat in Linda Morrison's cramped office at Pinnacle Title, surrounded by stacks of documents that smelled like old paper and bureaucratic secrets. Linda's been doing title work for 37 years, and her expression told me she'd found something unusual. "Your property has some very interesting features, Mr. Hayes," she said, spreading out a 1997 surveyor's map across her desk. The paper crackled under her fingers as she pointed to a series of small notations I'd never noticed before. "When your wife's father sold this land to Meadowbrook Development Corporation, he retained ownership of something quite valuable, Pinecrest Drive itself, the actual road." I stared at the map, trying to process what she was telling me. "The road? The street your neighbors live on, including Ms. Whitmore's property, sits on land that belongs to you. Your lot includes a 60-foot wide strip that encompasses the entire roadway from Maple Street to the cul-de-sac." The implications hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Vivian's $1 million house, along with 47 others, accessed their properties via a road that I legally owned. Linda continued, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering news that would change everything. "Meadowbrook Development went bankrupt in 2001. The road ownership was supposed to transfer to the city at that point, but the paperwork was never completed. You've been the legal owner of Pinecrest Drive for over 20 years. She pulled out another document, a handwritten note tucked inside Elena's jewelry box that I'd found the night before, following a hunch. Elena's father had left it there, along with the original property deed. "If anyone tries to bully you off this land," the note read in Elena's familiar handwriting, "check the 1997 survey markers. Daddy made sure we'd always have the upper hand." My hands shook as I held the note. Elena had known. She'd researched this during her father's estate settlement and left me the evidence, hidden but discoverable when I needed it most. Even in death, she was still protecting me. Jake arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the documents, and let out a low whistle that echoed off the office walls. "This changes everything," he said, scanning the legal descriptions. "As the road owner, you have significant rights. You can legally restrict access, charge usage fees, install gates, or petition the city to reclassify the street." What does reclassification mean? You can request the city declare Pinecrest Drive a private road with public easement. That would give you veto power over any construction, renovation, or development that requires street access. Want to build an addition? You'd need Garrett's permission. Want to sell your house? Buyers would need to know they're purchasing property that depends on your goodwill for access. The musty smell of old documents mixed with fresh coffee from Linda's desk mug created an oddly comforting atmosphere as the full scope of my power became clear. "There's more," Linda said, pulling out a thick folder. "The city has been maintaining your road for over 20 years without legal authority. You're entitled to reimbursement for all maintenance costs, approximately $8,000 annually." Elena's faint perfume still lingered on the handwritten note as I held it up to the light. She'd left me more than just good memories and a paid-off mortgage. She'd left me the nuclear option. Vivian Whitmore had spent months trying to force me off my property, not realizing that her own $1 million house sat on land that depended entirely on my permission to access. The hunter had just become the hunted. That night, I called an emergency war council in my kitchen. Jake arrived first, carrying a briefcase full of legal strategies and the kind of predatory grin lawyers get when they smell blood in the water. Harold showed up 20 minutes later with Marcus, my surveyor buddy, who'd helped me navigate tricky property lines on construction projects for years. "Gentlemen," I said, spreading the title documents across my kitchen table like battle plans, "we're about to teach a real estate agent what happens when you mess with someone who actually owns more than they realize." Jake cracked his knuckles and dove straight into the legal strategy. First, we file what's called a quiet title action. I learned about this during a messy divorce case where both spouses claimed the same vacation cabin. It officially establishes your road ownership in court and creates public record that eliminates any future disputes. The smell of fresh coffee mixed with the sweet taste of finally having a real plan as Jake outlined our next moves. Always get comprehensive title insurance, I thought, remembering advice Elena's father had given us years ago. You never know what surprises are buried in old property records. Second, we petition the city for street reclassification from public road to private road with public easement. This is where it gets interesting. You'll have control over access, maintenance, and any future development that requires street usage. Marcus pulled out his surveying equipment, the metal instruments clinking against my kitchen table like wind chimes made of justice. "I'll conduct an official survey and plant permanent boundary markers." Had a case 5 years ago where a homeowner discovered he owned his neighbor's driveway, similar situation to yours, but the neighbor was actually grateful instead of psychotic. "How long will this take?" I asked. 2 weeks for the survey, another month for legal filings, Jake said. But here's the beautiful part. We don't tell Vivian anything until the city officially notifies all affected property owners about the reclassification petition. Harold leaned back in his creaky chair and smiled with the satisfaction of a man who'd seen enough neighborhood drama to appreciate perfect revenge. "She's going to lose her mind when she realizes her house sits on property that depends entirely on your goodwill." Jake opened his briefcase and pulled out a thick folder documenting our harassment case. Security footage, police reports, spray paint incident, false complaints, towing receipts, it's all here. Once your road ownership is established, we file comprehensive harassment charges including property damage, business interference, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I remembered something Elena had mentioned years ago about private road ownership, giving people significant control over access and maintenance. Her father had dealt with a similar situation when he owned rental properties. Turned out, understanding the difference between easement rights and actual ownership could be the difference between being powerless and holding all the cards. We spent 2 hours calculating the financial implications. The city owed me approximately $160,000 in road maintenance costs dating back 20 years. Legal fees would be offset by Vivian's settlement and potential city reimbursement. My property value would actually increase once road ownership was confirmed. "There's something else," Harold said, his weathered hands folding over the documents. "I've been talking to other neighbors Vivian has targeted. Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street got similar pressure tactics to sell, same with the young couple renting the house on Oak. Systematic campaign," Marcus added, packing his surveying tools with practiced efficiency. "She's targeting anyone who doesn't fit her vision of executive neighborhood appeal." The taste of revenge mixed with bitter coffee created a flavor I'd never experienced before. Hope seasoned with justice, served at the perfect temperature. Jake outlined our psychological strategy with the precision of a military tactician. We let the city process everything through normal channels. When they send registered mail to all affected property owners about the reclassification hearing, Vivian discovers she's been attacking someone who literally controls her property's access. How long before she figures it out? City notification goes out in exactly 30 days. That's when she learns her $1 million house exists only because you allow it to. I thought about something Elena's father had always stressed: property easements had to be explicitly granted or established through documented long-term usage, and those rights could be revoked under specific circumstances, including harassment or violation of usage terms. "Never assume you have permanent rights to use someone else's property," he'd warned. Always verify easement terms and respect boundaries. As my war council packed up, the kitchen felt transformed. The same room where I'd eaten countless lonely dinners since Elena's death now buzzed with the energy of righteous men who'd found a cause worth fighting for. "Elena would be proud," Harold said, patting my shoulder with his calloused hand. "She always said her daddy was the smartest man she knew." Turns out she was absolutely right. The sound of chairs scraping against linoleum mixed with the distant purr of Vivian's Tesla pulling into her driveway 3 houses down. She had no idea her world was about to change forever. Time to show a bully what real power looked like. While my legal team quietly prepared the paperwork that would change everything, Vivian apparently sensed something was shifting in her favor, or so she thought. The woman who'd been methodically harassing me for months suddenly kicked into overdrive like a predator that smells wounded prey. It started when she somehow discovered through the city clerk that I'd filed what she called a mysterious property claim. I watched through my kitchen window as she marched out of City Hall 3 days later, her face twisted with the kind of panic that comes from realizing you might not be holding all the cards after all. That's when the sabotage escalated from psychological to physical. I woke up Tuesday morning to find a nail strip stretched across my driveway, the kind tow trucks use to stop fleeing vehicles. Professional grade, perfectly positioned to catch both my work truck's front tires. The metallic smell of punctured rubber mixed with my morning coffee as I surveyed $340 worth of damage to 2 brand new Michelin tires. My security cameras had captured everything. At 3:17 a.m., a figure in a dark hoodie placed the strip with surgical precision, then disappeared into the shadows between houses. The build and gait looked familiar, but the face was completely obscured. "Smart," Deputy Williams said, reviewing the footage on my laptop screen. "Whoever did this knew exactly where your cameras were positioned and how to avoid facial identification." But here's what Vivian didn't know. I'd installed additional motion sensor cameras with night vision after the spray paint incident. Cameras she hadn't spotted during her careful surveillance of my property. The backup footage showed her returning 20 minutes later to retrieve the nail strip, thinking she'd covered her tracks. Her face was clearly visible for exactly 3 seconds as she looked up to check for witnesses. 3 seconds that would eventually cost her everything. That afternoon, she made her most desperate move yet, a bribery attempt disguised as neighborly concern. I was replacing my damaged tires when Vivian approached carrying a manila folder and wearing the kind of fake smile that probably sold a lot of overpriced houses to unsuspecting buyers. "Garrett, I've been thinking about our situation," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that mixed with the rubber smell from my tire repair. "I realize we got off on the wrong foot." She opened the folder to reveal a real estate contract with my address pre-filled and a purchase price that made my eyes widen. Fair market value plus 15%, nearly $200,000 more than my house was worth. "I have a client who's very interested in corner lots for investment purposes," she continued. "This would solve both our problems. You could move somewhere more suitable to your lifestyle, and the neighborhood could return to its intended character." The sheer audacity was breathtaking. After months of harassment, property damage, and legal threats, she was offering to buy my house at inflated prices to make her problem disappear. "That's generous," I said, wiping grease from my hands with a shop rag. "But I'm exactly where I belong." Her mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the calculating predator underneath. "It would be unfortunate if life became more difficult for someone who chooses to stay where they're not welcome." That threat, made while I was changing tires she'd deliberately punctured, crystallized everything I needed to know about Vivian Whitmore's character. Harold dropped the next bombshell that evening while we shared beers on my back porch. The old electrician had been doing his own investigation into Vivian's recent real estate activities. "She's been pressuring 3 other households to sell," he said, his weathered hands gripping a Budweiser that reflected the setting sun. "Mrs. Patterson, the Martinez family, and the young couple renting the Blue House on Oak Street. Same pattern harassment followed by generous offers. All people she considers undesirable? Elderly widow, Hispanic family with kids who play outside, and renters who park their older cars on the street. She's trying to flip the neighborhood demographics one house at a time." The pieces fell into place like a construction blueprint finally making sense. This wasn't random harassment. It was systematic, ethnic, and economic cleansing disguised as property value protection. That night, I sat in my truck with the engine running, watching Vivian's house 3 doors down. Every light was on, and I could see her silhouette pacing back and forth in her living room like a caged animal. The woman who'd spent months trying to force me out was now trapped in her own anxiety, probably wondering what legal landmine she'd stepped on. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Quiet title action filed. City notification goes out Monday. Hope she's ready for the surprise of her lifetime. The diesel exhaust from my truck mixed with the cool evening air, creating a scent that somehow captured this entire surreal situation. The smell of justice slowly building pressure like steam in a boiler. Vivian Whitmore had escalated this conflict beyond anything reasonable, and now she was about to discover that some people fight back with weapons she never saw coming. The Monday morning when city notifications went out, I watched through my kitchen window as the postal truck delivered registered mail to every house on Pinecrest Drive. Vivian's white Tesla was conspicuously absent from her driveway, probably showing houses to unsuspecting buyers who had no idea they were dealing with a woman on the verge of a complete breakdown. She returned around 3 p.m., and I'll never forget the sound she made when she opened that envelope. Even from 3 houses away, her shriek of rage cut through the afternoon air like a circular saw hitting a nail, the sound of someone's carefully constructed world collapsing in real time. By 4 p.m., she'd hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me. I know because Harold spotted the guy taking photos of my house while pretending to check his phone. Former cop, probably desperate for work, willing to take money from a woman who was clearly losing her mind. Professional-looking fellow, Harold said, describing the PI over coffee. But he's asking questions about your business practices, your wife's death, even your financial situation. This woman's trying to build a case that you're unstable. The coffee tasted bitter as the implications sank in. Vivian wasn't just panicking, she was going nuclear, trying to destroy my reputation and business to force me out before I could use my newfound leverage. Tuesday brought anonymous flyers in every mailbox on the street. High-quality printing, professionally designed, with doctored photos making my property look neglected and dangerous. The headline read, "Neighborhood Safety Alert. Unstable resident threatens community values." The flyers claimed I was potentially dangerous since wife's death, and listed my work truck schedule as a security concern for children. They included cherry-picked photos from security footage, manipulated to make me appear threatening and unstable. But here's where Vivian's desperation finally betrayed her completely. My upgraded security cameras caught her distributing the flyers at 5:23 a.m., wearing the same designer workout clothes she'd worn to spy on my property dozens of times before. Her face was clearly visible in the morning light as she stuffed mailboxes with her character assassination attempt. The smell of fresh ink on those flyers mixed with the dawn air created an oddly appropriate scent for what felt like the final battle of a war I'd never wanted to fight. By Wednesday, she'd escalated to attacking my livelihood directly. Someone filed complaints with the state contractor licensing board, alleging unprofessional conduct, property damage, and intimidation of homeowners. 3 anonymous complainers provided detailed testimony about my allegedly poor work quality and threatening behavior. The licensing board hearing was scheduled for Friday morning in downtown Austin. I had to defend 15 years of spotless professional conduct against fabricated allegations designed to destroy my ability to work. Jake accompanied me to the hearing, carrying a briefcase full of customer testimonials, work photos, and business records that told the real story. The hearing room smelled like stale coffee and bureaucratic indifference as Vivian's hired attorney presented his case against my character. Mr. Hayes has demonstrated a pattern of neighbor disputes and aggressive behavior, the attorney claimed, reading from prepared notes. These complaints represent a concerning escalation that threatens public safety. Then Jake stood up and methodically destroyed their entire case. Customer after customer had provided written testimonials about my professionalism. Work photos showed craftsmanship that spoke for itself. Most importantly, when the board tried to contact those anonymous complainers for follow-up questions, all 3 phone numbers were disconnected. These allegations appear to be entirely fabricated, the board chairman concluded after 30 minutes of testimony. Mr. Hayes, your license remains in good standing. We apologize for this waste of your time. But the real bombshell came Thursday evening when Jake called with news that changed everything. I've been digging into Vivian's real estate activities, he said, his voice tight with professional disgust. Her development company owns option contracts on 5 properties in your neighborhood, all homes belonging to people she's been harassing. The pieces clicked together like a perfectly engineered machine. Mrs. Patterson's house, the Martinez family's property, the rental on Oak Street. Vivian had been systematically targeting undesirable residents to force sales, then flipping their properties for massive profits. Her entire harassment campaign was business strategy, Jake continued. She's been creating problems to drive down prices, then swooping in with development offers. Your road ownership discovery threatens to kill her entire scheme. That night, I sat on my back porch watching Vivian's house blaze with lights until nearly midnight. Every window glowed like a beacon of panic as she probably frantically called lawyers, trying to find some way to challenge my property rights before the public hearing. The evening air carried the scent of honeysuckle mixed with the distant smell of diesel exhaust from the highway, a combination that somehow perfectly captured this moment when justice was finally building toward its inevitable conclusion. Vivian Whitmore had spent months trying to force me out through harassment, sabotage, and character assassination. Now she was about to discover that her $1 million house sat on property that existed only because I allowed it to. The hunter was about to become the hunted in the most public way possible. The City Council public hearing was scheduled for 7 p.m. on a Thursday, and by 6:30 the Civic Center was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread through social media about the unusual property rights case, and it seemed like half the county had shown up to watch the fireworks. Local TV news crews from 3 stations set up cameras in the back, their bright lights creating an almost theatrical atmosphere. The smell of burnt coffee mixed with nervous energy as people filled every folding chair and lined the walls. I'd never seen so many people interested in municipal property law. Vivian arrived fashionably late in a black power suit, flanked by an expensive attorney who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She carried a leather briefcase and wore the kind of confident expression that suggested she still believed money and legal intimidation could solve her problems. I walked in wearing my best work shirt and carrying the original 1997 surveyor's map that would end her world. The murmur of anticipation died as Mayor Rodriguez called the hearing to order. The sound of his gavel echoed through the packed chamber like a starting gun for the main event everyone had come to see. Tonight we're hearing a petition for street reclassification of Pinecrest Drive, the mayor announced. The petitioner claims private ownership of the roadway currently maintained by the city. Vivian's attorney went first, and I'll give him credit. He tried his best with an impossible case. He argued that my road ownership claim was legally frivolous and that the city's 20-plus years of maintenance had established permanent public ownership through adverse possession. My client and 47 other homeowners invested in properties with guaranteed public road access, he declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone who probably charged $500 an hour to lose cases. This frivolous claim threatens the property values and legal rights of an entire community. He presented a petition signed by 63 neighbors opposing the reclassification. Impressive, until you realized most of them had no idea what they were actually signing. Then, City Attorney Sarah Walsh stood up and delivered the legal equivalent of a nuclear bomb. The petitioner's road ownership claim is legally valid and has been confirmed by comprehensive title search, she announced, her voice cutting through the chamber like a scalpel. Meadowbrook Development Corporation went bankrupt in 2001, and the road transfer to public ownership was never completed. Mr. Hayes has been the legal owner of Pinecrest Drive for over 20 years. The crowd's murmur rose to a buzz as the implications sank in. Vivian's face went pale as fresh concrete. Furthermore, Walsh continued, the city has been maintaining private property without legal authority for 2 decades. Mr. Hayes is entitled to reimbursement for unauthorized maintenance costs. That's when I stood up for my moment. Jake had coached me to keep it simple, factual, and devastating. Council members, I never wanted this fight, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the packed chamber. I just wanted to live peacefully in the home my late wife left me. Instead, I've been systematically harassed, had my property vandalized, my truck illegally towed, and my business reputation attacked. I nodded to Jake, who began projecting security footage onto the chamber's main screen. The crowd watched in silence as months of harassment played out in high definition. Vivian measuring my truck's position with a tape measure, directing the tow truck operator, spray painting my garage door, distributing defamatory flyers. This is what happens when someone decides a working man doesn't belong in their vision of suburban paradise, I continued. But here's what Ms. Whitmore didn't know. Her $1 million house sits on property that depends entirely on my permission for access. That's when Vivian finally snapped. She stood up abruptly, knocking over her water glass, and pointed at me with a trembling finger. "This is extortion!" she screamed, her carefully maintained composure cracking like ice in the Texas sun. "He's weaponizing property laws for personal revenge. I demand the city ignore this fraudulent claim." The mayor gavelled for order, but Vivian wasn't finished. "He's been stalking me with those cameras. He's unstable since his wife died. This whole neighborhood knows he doesn't belong here." The chamber fell silent except for the whir of TV cameras capturing her complete meltdown. Her attorney tried to pull her back into her seat, but the damage was done. She'd just admitted on camera, in front of 50 witnesses and 3 news crews, exactly what this had always been about. "Ma'am, please take your seat," Mayor Rodriguez said firmly. "Outbursts are not permitted during public hearings." But Vivian was beyond reason now, tears streaming down her face as 20 years of entitled superiority collapsed in real time. "You can't let him do this. My house is worth more than his entire existence. I have rights." The council voted unanimously to approve the reclassification. 5-0, just like her petition against me months earlier. As the gavel fell, Vivian collapsed into her chair, sobbing audibly while her attorney frantically whispered damage control strategies that would never work. Outside in the parking lot, Deputy Martinez was waiting with harassment lawsuit papers that Jake had prepared for this exact moment. The evening news would lead with footage of Vivian's meltdown for 3 straight nights. Justice had never tasted so sweet. 3 weeks after Vivian's public meltdown became local internet legend, her attorney called Jake with settlement terms that were music to my ears. $15,000 in damages, full reimbursement for all legal fees, a formal written apology, and an agreement to cease all contact with me forever. More importantly, she had to disclose the private road ownership to any future property buyers, a requirement that essentially killed her house's resale value and her development company's expansion plans. The settlement check arrived on a Tuesday, along with a 2-paragraph apology that read like it was written by a lawyer who'd given up all hope. Vivian's Tesla disappeared from the neighborhood that same week, followed by a for sale sign that would stay in her yard for 8 months before she finally accepted an offer 20% below asking price. But the real victory came in how our community healed itself. I organized the first annual Pinecrest Drive block party right there on the road I legally owned, complete with Harold manning a barbecue grill that filled the air with the smoky scent of victory. Mrs. Chen brought homemade dumplings, the Martinez kids set up a lemonade stand, and even the young couple from the rental house joined in with acoustic guitars and voices that turned our street into something that felt like home again. "Elena would have loved this," Harold said, flipping burgers while wearing an apron that read Master of the Grill. The old electrician had become our unofficial neighborhood historian, sharing stories about the early days when people actually talked to each other instead of measuring grass heights with rulers. The road ownership situation resolved itself more elegantly than anyone expected. I negotiated a formal public easement with the city that allowed them to continue maintenance while preserving my veto power over major developments. Property values actually increased once buyers realized they were purchasing homes in a neighborhood with guaranteed low-density zoning. The $18,000 reimbursement from the city, combined with Vivian's settlement, gave me the seed money for something Elena would have been proud of: the Elena Memorial Scholarship Fund for trade school students from working-class families. Every year, we award 3 scholarships to kids who want to learn skills that matter: plumbing, electrical work, carpentry, the trades that keep civilization running while real estate agents shuffle paper and pretend they're adding value to the world. The scholarship ceremony happens every spring in my backyard, where the scent of Elena's old rose garden mingles with the sound of power tools from my workshop. Last year's recipients included Maria Santos, who's now the top student in her electrical program, and David Kim, whose welding skills already surpass mine. But the best part? Harold started teaching basic property rights workshops at the community center, using my case as an example of why people need to understand what they actually own. The Know Your Rights sessions draw standing room-only crowds, and we've helped 6 other homeowners discover easements and property rights they never knew they had. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly widow Vivian had harassed, turned out to own mineral rights under 3 neighbors' properties, knowledge that stopped a pushy oil company from pressuring her into an unfavorable lease. The Martinez family discovered their backyard included water rights that made their property significantly more valuable than they'd realized. The ripple effects keep spreading. Our neighborhood became a model for property rights education, and the story inspired similar harassment victims across Texas to investigate their legal options. The local legal aid society now offers free Elena's Law workshops, teaching people how to research their own property rights and fight back against HOA overreach. 6 months after the hearing, I got a letter from a construction worker in Dallas who'd used our story to stop his HOA from forcing him to move his work truck. A widow in Houston discovered she owned the alley behind her house after reading about Elena's research methods online. Sometimes fighting back creates a roadmap for others to follow. As I write this, sitting on my back porch where Elena and I used to plan our retirement, the sound of children playing drifts down from the street I own, the street where neighbors help each other instead of measuring each other's grass, the street where working people belong just as much as anyone else. Elena's wedding ring still hangs on a chain around my neck, warm against my chest as the Texas sunset paints the sky the color of justice served at exactly the right temperature. Have you ever had to deal with an HOA nightmare that made you question your faith in humanity? Drop your story in the comments below. Misery loves company, but victory loves sharing the blueprint. And if you enjoyed watching a bully get exactly what she deserved, hit that subscribe button. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't living well, it's legally owning the road your enemies drive on.
You've been watching HOA Stories, where entitled Karens get a reality check. If this episode gave you secondhand rage or satisfaction, hit that like, leave your take in the comments, and subscribe so you're the first in line for more weekly HOA chaos.